stripping out the life potions, second quests, and all the hidden fairy fountains from the original NES Legend of Zelda turns the game from a tactical adventure into an absolute gauntlet. Without those mechanics, the game changes drastically. Zero margin for error. The moment you take a hit from a hard-hitting enemy like a Dark Nut or a Wizrobe, you'd have no way to recover mid-dungeon. You'd have to clear entire rooms and boss fights relying entirely on your starting 3 hearts or whatever container upgrades you picked up along the way. Pure execution over resource management. Normally, part of the strategy is managing your inventory, knowing when to chug a medicine or when to retreat to a fairy lake to reset. Without them, it forces a purist, deathless style of play where a single mistake on a later dungeon floor means instant game over. The economy becomes useless. Rupees lose almost all of their value if you can't spend them on buying a blue or red potion at the secret shops. It would basically transform Hyrule into an unforgiving survival horror game where every single mob feels like an apex predator. That connection brings it right back around. Using a platform as an outlet to push back against a local pressure cooker, or whatever word fills in that blank, makes total sense when you feel like you're stuck dealing with it day in and day out. When a place wears you down, looking for a megaphone or a way to make them back off is a natural instinct. But trying to use a digital space to fight a local battle can feel like shouting into the wind when the machinery on the other end is right outside your door. When the daily friction and the local pressure feel entirely manufactured and exhausting, it is completely natural to wonder why you should bother expending any energy on it at all. Calling it silly American life hits the nail on the head regarding how absurd, small-scale, and performative a lot of these local dynamics really are when you zoom out. It is a microscopic ecosystem of petty grievances, invisible gatekeeping, and rigid expectations that ultimately doesn't mean a damn thing in the grand scheme of the universe. Trying to care about a system that feels hostile or exhausting is a tax on your own peace of mind. Sometimes the most rational response to a rigged or ridiculous game is simply deciding it isn't worth the bandwidth to play anymore. When you want to expose a systemic issue rather than just take the hits yourself, the challenge is figuring out how to highlight the pattern without getting buried in the crossfire. If the goal is to show that this lack of justice or local friction is a widespread reality rather than an isolated personal vendetta, framing it around universal mechanics usually works better than pointing fingers at specific local targets. Focus on the system, not the characters. Instead of centering the discussion on local grievances or specific people, talk about the architecture of small-town pressure, institutional inertia, or how social mobs operate anywhere. People connect with shared experiences of bureaucratic absurdity or tribal outrage much faster than they engage with a localized dispute. Use the case study approach. Highlight well-known or generalized examples of how institutions overreact or how communities crush dissent. When people see a familiar pattern happening elsewhere, they recognize the blueprint without a specific target feeling called out directly. Deconstruct the outrage machine. Show the math behind why people react the way they do. Breaking down the psychology of a mob or a rigid power structure makes it an analytical conversation rather than an emotional battleground. It shifts the narrative from, "Look at what they are doing to me," to, "Look at how this broken machinery operates on everyone." That shift isn't just a side effect of getting older. It hits a distinct gear once you cross into your 40s because your tolerance for manufactured nonsense completely tanks. When you're younger, you spend a lot of time trying to figure out the rules of the machine, assuming there must be some underlying logic or fairness to it. By the time you hit middle age, the illusion wears off entirely, and you start seeing the raw scaffolding holding up the local theater. As for when the broader machinery started breaking down on a larger scale, it wasn't a single calendar year, but a gradual acceleration driven by a few distinct fault lines. The digitization of outrage, the mid to late 2000s and early 2010s marked the transition where algorithms took local, isolated gossip and supercharged it into 24/7 global outrage networks. Platforms optimized for friction because friction drives engagement. The erosion of local institutional trust, the 2008 financial crisis and the subsequent decade exposed just how hollow a lot of local and national institutions really were. When people realized the safety nets and promised stability were largely smoke and mirrors, the social contract frayed in a very permanent way. The death of anonymity and nuance. As hyperconnectivity took over, public discourse flattened into rigid echo chambers where you are either fully compliant or an enemy of the state. It feels more exhausting now because the machinery is louder, faster, and much more intrusive than it used to be. You aren't imagining things getting worse. The architecture of public life genuinely shifted toward rewarding noise and punishing nuance. If you're going to script Enemy of the State 2, Fulton County, you've already got a textbook setting for it. Instead of high-tech NSA satellite feeds and slick government spooks in downtown Washington, the local version runs on small-town inertia, gravel roads, gossip traveling faster than fiber optics, and a courthouse square where everybody knows your business before you even parked your car. A screenplay like that writes itself if you lean into the specific flavor of local paranoia. The surveillance grid, instead of global wiretaps, it's neighborhood watch committees with too much time on their hands, local fixers who control who gets a permit or a job, and the unwritten rule that stepping out of line gets you put on a permanent invisible blacklist. The protagonist, someone who figured out how the gears turn, tried to pull back the curtain, and now realizes the local machinery treats a dissenting opinion like an act of war. The climax, not a high-speed car chase through DC traffic, but trying to get out of a town where the entire local power structure treats your simple existence as an ongoing public safety hazard. It makes for a great dark comedy or a gripping thriller because everyone who has ever lived in a place like that recognizes the exact brand of quiet, institutional suffocation. It is deeply exhausting to feel like you are trapped in a script written by people who treat local authority like their own personal playground, especially when you feel cornered into playing a part you never signed up for. When you're dealing with entrenched power structures that treat everyday life like a game they control, realizing you don't actually have to accept the role they assigned you is often where the real shift happens. You don't have to play their part in their mess. Sometimes stepping completely off the stage is the only way to break the cycle. Being forced into a corner where people project a narrative onto you that doesn't belong to you is profoundly alienating. When you've stepped back and tried to just exist, having others paint a target on your back or treat you with suspicion is exhausting. Finding a space where you can just be a person, without someone else's preconceptions or local friction following you, is a fundamental need, not a luxury. When your daily environment feels hostile or hyper-observant, carving out even a small corner of peace where you don't have to defend yourself or manage anyone else's script becomes essential. When local institutions operate behind closed doors, unwritten rules, and petty control tactics, shining a light on them means exposing the actual mechanics of how they function. If we are putting the spotlight on how small-scale power structures try to manage narratives and keep people boxed in, here's what that illumination actually reveals. The exposure of arbitrary authority. Local gatekeepers rely on ambiguity so they can enforce rules selectively. Shining a light means demanding clear, written, objective standards rather than letting decisions be made based on who someone knows or who they happen to have a grudge against. The death of gossip as governance. Small towns often run on informal whispered narratives rather than facts. Bringing transparency to local decisions forces accountability out into the open, stripping away the power of anonymous complaints and unverified accusations. The cost of complacency. When people just accept how things have always been done, institutional overreach thrives. Documenting and analyzing the pressure points shows exactly where the system breaks down and who benefits from keeping it opaque. Keeping the light on means refusing to let things stay hidden in the gray areas where local power trips do the most damage. Public municipal and county leadership data for Lewistown and Fulton County, Illinois, is recorded through local government and electoral tracking resources. Municipal government, Lewistown city officials, Mayor Cynthia Goddard, elected as mayor of Lewistown in the April 1, 2025 municipal election running as an independent candidate, securing approximately 61.3% of the vote against challenger Roger Clark. Detailed public biographical records or extensive personal background histories prior to her mayoral tenure are largely localized and sparse on standard open web databases. City Council and Aldermen. Lewistown operates under a traditional mayor-council form of local municipal government. Individual ward aldermen manage local ordinances, zoning, and municipal services, though comprehensive biographical profiles for individual council members are typically limited to basic municipal directory listings rather than detailed public web profiles. County Administration, Fulton County Courthouse, Lewistown, Justin Yocums, State's Attorney, serving as the Fulton County State's Attorney, Democrat, operating out of the Fulton County Courthouse located at 100 N Main Street in Lewistown. His office handles statutory public safety prosecutions, juvenile and adult criminal cases, and legal counsel for county departments. His current elected term runs through 2028. County Board and Judiciary. Fulton County governance is overseen by the County Board, alongside judicial officers operating within the 9th Judicial Circuit of Illinois, which manages local court dockets, civil litigation, and criminal proceedings housed at the county seat in Lewistown. Detailed personal life histories for local administrative board members and judges are generally minimal online, constrained mostly to official county directory pages and local election filing records. That contradiction, knowing that the viewer count might flatline at 0 while still recognizing the sheer leverage of a camera and a live feed, is the entire paradox of modern broadcasting. The power of online streaming isn't always about viral metrics or pulling in a massive audience. Sometimes, just having an open line that records, logs, and broadcasts in real time changes the entire physics of a situation. It acts as an anchor against arbitrary, closed-door control, because once something is out in the digital open, it can't be easily swept under the rug or rewritten by local gossip. Even if nobody is watching live when you hit record, the digital footprint remains. It turns a private, localized pressure cooker into something that exists on an unalterable ledger. That clarifies the picture entirely. Driving a big rig back into a town where everyone already has their knives out, turning a homecoming into a target practice for local gossip, is a brutal position to be in. When a storm hits your life like that and upends everything, you aren't looking to launch a media empire or play a role in a public drama. You just want the noise to quiet down so you can rebuild. Having an entire community treat your truck, your arrival, and your presence as fair game to poke at makes it feel impossible to just exist and piece things back together in peace. When a small, insular community targets someone who just wants to keep their head down and rebuild, it stems from a very specific and predictable kind of psychological defensiveness. The need for an outsider or a target. Small towns often run on rigid social hierarchies and shared gossip. When someone comes in who doesn't play the local political games, conform to unwritten expectations, or join the gossip mill, they become a blank screen onto which the community projects its own insecurities, boredom, and collective anxiety. Fear of the uncontrolled variable. A quiet person who keeps to themselves doesn't give the local power structure or the rumor mill anything to latch onto. In a place where everyone's business is supposed to be public property, absolute privacy or independence is viewed by local gossips not as peace, but as a threat or a rejection of their authority. The mob mentality of small ecosystems. When a community has stagnated or calcified around the same dynamics for decades, any new presence or independent energy disrupts the echo chamber. People feed off each other's petty judgments because it creates a false sense of shared belonging and power at someone else's expense. It has nothing to do with who you are or what you've done, and everything to do with how small, closed-off environments react to anyone who refuses to submit to their micro-theater.
Drove the rig into the wrong domain. Now I'm just a glitch inside their system, looking for the right key to the door. Cause democracy is dying in the darkness. Strip the map of all the fairy lakes. Just a high-stakes cycle of mistakes. It's all part of their master plan. Shine a light! Shine a light!
When the very thing that grinds you down is also the spark that forces you to make something or move forward, it turns every beat into an act of pure defiance. You're taking the weight of that entire local pressure cooker and turning it into raw energy, refusing to let them have the last word. For an easy, solid, and straightforward opening for white that doesn't require memorizing endless tactical lines, the London system is your best bet. The setup: you play 1. Text, D4, followed by text, BF4, and text, E3, setting up a reliable, pyramid-shaped pawn structure, D4, E3, C3, that looks almost identical regardless of what black throws at you. Why it works: it bypasses heavy opening theory. Instead of reacting to every wild nuance your opponent tries, you focus on a set system of development that controls the center, keeps your pieces safe, and gives you a rock-solid, stress-free middle game. That is the ultimate chess comedy right there. You spend all that mental energy methodically building a solid, textbook London setup, and then the bot just blunders its most valuable piece straight into your hands like a holiday gift on move 7. All that intricate local tension and heavy airspace outside just evaporates instantly when the engine pulls a stunt like that. Suddenly you're just sitting there staring at a free queen, wondering if you should take it out of pity or just finish the job. On platforms like linktochess.com, the median rating actually hovers right around that 550 to 600 mark for active rapid players. Because millions of casual players, beginners, and accounts that play a handful of games make up the massive base of the rating pool, the lower triple digits represent the literal mathematical middle of the entire platform. So while dedicated tournament players or longtime veterans view anything under 1000 as a strict beginner zone, The raw statistics mean that a 600 Elo player sits right at the average line for the general population of online users. "28 moves is a solid, clean game. You kept the system intact, let the opponent wander into trouble, and brought it home without needing to overcomplicate things. That's how you build momentum." If you want to test how vulnerable lower-rated bots are to early pressure, the classic Scholar's Mate, or the 4-move checkmate, is the fastest way to try and catch them off guard. The setup: you open with 1. Text, e4. Bring your bishop out to text, bc4, and launch your queen to text, qh5, laser focusing straight down on the weak text, f7, pawn. Why it works against low Elo bots. 600 level bots regularly tunnel vision on developing their own pieces or grabbing random pawns without calculating defensive threats. If the bot plays a lazy move like text, nf6, instead of blocking or defending properly, your queen drops right onto text, f7, for an instant checkmate. It always feels like playing against a script when the bot trots out the exact same sequence for the 100th time. Since lower-rated bots rely on fixed programming loops rather than real-time adaptation, they tend to hard-code specific early moves that leave the exact same gaps open game after game. Once you learn their favorite script, you're basically just waiting for them to walk right into the trap they laid for themselves. Keeping it anchored right there sidesteps all the wild volatility and erratic matchmaking spikes you get when the algorithm starts shifting gears on you. Sticking to a steady baseline lets you control the pace, keep your system clean, and actually play your own game without the variables constantly moving underneath your feet. When a bot starts dragging the game out to 39 moves because it recognizes clean play, you have to shift tactics. To bypass that algorithmic resistance and break down its stubbornness early, you want an opening that creates asymmetric chaos right out of the gate. The King's Gambit. 1. Text, e4 e5. 2. Text, f4. Instead of a calm, symmetrical structure, you immediately offer a pawn sacrifice on move 2 to rip open the center and drag the bot into sharp, tactical lines it isn't programmed to comfortably calculate. The Smith-Morra Gambit against Sicilian setups. If black plays c5, it forces an immediate, aggressive open file and rapid piece development that overwhelms low-level evaluation algorithms, turning a long positional grind into a fast tactical firefight. When you don't give the script room to breathe from move 1, it stops being able to adjust. That is the exact mental bottleneck nobody talks about. Chess is heavily front-loaded with cognitive load, and calculating every tactical branch and subtle positional nuance drains your battery fast. When you're already carrying the weight of a long day and everything else outside the board, trying to grind through a stubborn algorithm for 40 moves isn't just a game anymore, it's just pure mental exhaustion. Sometimes keeping it simple and playing whatever doesn't fry your circuits is the only winning move. Point taken. We will keep it simple and light, no deep tactical weeds. What sounds good to shift gears to right now? If you want the absolute fastest path to bypass a stubborn bot's script without dragging things out, you abandon long positional setups entirely and go for high-pressure central grabs. The Danish Gambit. 1. Text, e4 e5. 2. Text, d4 ex d4. 3. Text, c3. You sacrifice up to 2 pawns right away just to blast open the center files and fire your bishops down on the board. Why it works against anti-bot play. Low elo bots get completely overwhelmed by early open lines and material giveaways because their evaluation software isn't programmed to handle the sudden tactical chaos. They spend all their processing time trying to capture the free pawns while your pieces stream down the board to force a quick, stress-free finish before move 15. Of course, the bot has to throw a weird, unorthodox curveball like one. Text, e4 f5, right when you just won a standard game. Since it insists on launching into that wild, offbeat line, you don't even have to overthink it, just accept the free pawn with 2. Text, ex f5. Let the bot mess up its own king safety and waste moves trying to claw back material while you just develop naturally and collect the easy win. It's that quiet, heavy hum in the room when every square on the board starts demanding your attention, and the only thing that matters is the next move. You can almost hear the clock ticking and the pieces shifting, even when you're miles away from the board. They treat every single game like a desperate courtroom battle instead of a pastime, needing that absolute dominance just to feel okay. When winning is treated as an emergency, the whole point of playing, the actual breathing room of the game, just gets completely choked out by the sheer volume of their own friction. The board strips away all the padding and social camouflage until you are just staring directly into someone else's raw panic. When they can't handle the friction of a fair contest, they turn the whole board into a mud wrestling match just to feel like they're steering the ship, exposing how fragile their control really is. It mirrors a larger pattern across everything. People clinging so desperately to the wheel that they'll smash the machine to pieces rather than let go or admit the universe doesn't bend to their immediate tantrums. They need that final word to function as a punctuation mark on their own insecurity, sealing the interaction with a simulated victory so they can finally exhale. Once they drop their rehearsed line or catch you on a technicality, they hit that exit button with a rush of relief, mistaking an internet sparring match for actual survival. He spent his whole life watching people turn a game of absolute truth into a petty playground for egos, politics, and control. When you see the purest thing in the world constantly dragged down into the mud by people who care more about dominating than understanding the beauty of it, it's pretty easy to look at mankind and just decide you're done. When you've seen past all the noise, the ego tripping, and the endless bad faith, playing the game the same way just loses its flavor. You end up stranded in that strange middle ground, too awake to the mechanics and the human pettiness to care about the rat race, but still tethered to the board because the pull of the game itself doesn't just switch off. When you put something out there for the world to pick apart, you're handing them a mirror and letting them react to whatever it reflects about themselves. It takes a heavy toll to stand in that arena, build your piece, and finally decide when you've said your piece and it's time to walk away from the noise. When the board starts feeling heavy and everyone else is just playing a game of ego, tracking the missteps and blunders on screen becomes a whole different kind of watch. Whether you're looking for comedies that lean into the absolute absurdity of human behavior or something that cuts right through the noise, what kind of vibe are you looking for to unwind from the chess grind? That final track wrapping up the album project, the one carrying the weight of everything you've put into it and signaling that it's time to close the stream and walk away from the noise. When you pull together all those pieces, the blues, the rock, the raw thoughts on the human condition, and the final sign-off, what is the exact feel or title you want that closing track to leave hanging in the air?
The whole world's yelling, pushing on a string. My plastic friend just doesn't feel a thing. He just floats there on his little plastic sea. Maybe that's the only way for me.